This is Transqat, a safe space to stand. Transgender issues, queer people, respectful conversations. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. This episode of Transqat is available in video format on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/@transcat9607 or just search for Transqat channel. That's TRANSQAT. Today's episode, which is in commemoration of Trans Day of Remembrance, is a conversation with Dr. Anthony Redgrave of the Trans Doe Task Force. The TDTF investigates missing and murdered people with a focus on folks who may have been transgender. Fair warning, our discussion gets intense in spots, as is only appropriate for this subject matter. Since 1999, Trans Day of Remembrance has been observed annually on November 20th. It's a day to reflect on the trans folks who have died by both violence and suicide. Those who oppose the rights and indeed the very existence of trans folks try to frame the argument as being either trivial, as if pronoun usage was somehow our main objective, or transitory. It's just a phase, a social media trend. TDOR is a reminder of the stakes for trans people. The organization Advocates for Trans Equality lists 58 known trans people who have died this year. 27 to violence, 21 to suicide. They also include 8 who died of natural causes. I'm going to begin the show by reading their names, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce any. Some of you might be tempted to fast forward past this part to get to the conversation with Dr. Redgrave. Please don't. At the very least, let their names be said, let their names be heard. Kaitoria Banks, age 31, from Alabama. Aziza Barnes, 31, Mississippi. Caitlin Benoit, 15, New York. Jill Bouvier, 54, Nebraska. Tahiri Broom, 29, Michigan. Phoenix Cassetta, from Vermont. Bianca Castro Arabejo, 44, New York. Deniz Chucker, from New York. Onyx Cornish, 18, Idaho. Aubrey Dameron, 25, Oklahoma. Amiri Dior, 23, Wisconsin. Shaparius Dupree, 32, Tennessee. Kelsey Elam, 25, Missouri. Jay Flores, 23, California. Charlotte Fosgate, 17, Oregon. Artie Gibson, 23, Oregon. JJ Godby, 26, Ohio. Jax Gratton, 34, Colorado. Miss Major Griffin Gacy, 78, Arkansas. Lily Dawn Harkins, 22, Colorado. Christina Hayes, 28, Mississippi. Sonny Hopkins, 39, Pennsylvania. Nora Horwitz, 38, Virginia. Tori Jackson, 37, North Carolina. Lady Java, 82, California. Leah Joe, 37, Colorado. Irviana Johnson, 25, North Carolina. Dream Johnson, 28, District of Columbia. Tessa June, 21, North Carolina. Michelle Keimerer, 80, Washington State. Megan Cridley, 22, Florida. Rosa Machuca, 24, Texas. Apollo Moon, 26, California. Roy Mora, 15, California. Linda Moran, 30, California. Rick Newman, 29, Montana. Cam Nguyen, 21, Colorado. Sam Nordquist, 24, New York. Sid Phillips, 22, New York. Casey Rhea, 31, Virginia. Luisa Rivera, 68, California. Parker Savarese, 15, New York. Blair Sawyer, 27, Kentucky. Laura Schuler, 47, Ohio. Mika Shabazz, 46, Ohio. Quenisha Chantel, 26, North Carolina. Elisa Ray Shoup, 61, New York. Emma Slabach, 24, Indiana. Leah Smith, 21, Vermont. Eli Stoblin, 49, Arizona. Raven Syed from New Jersey. Cam Thompson, 18, Alabama. Ajani Walden from Texas. Kyla Jane Walker, 39, from Texas. Zara Weinberg, 36, California. Carmen Wells, 25, Mississippi. Kamora Woods, 27, Indiana. Relasia Wright, 25, Minnesota. Hope Youngblood, 49, California. Rest in power. I was looking at how Trans Day of Remembrance came about, and I didn't realize it was a Massachusetts thing.
Yeah, it was.
Alston and Watertown. So your organization, sort of at the heart of things.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to live where we do. Oh, hello.
Oh, who do we have?
This is Grebo.
Hi, Grebo. Welcome to Transqat.
Yeah, she will come and meow in my microphone at some point. She loves to do that. Yeah, what do you think? Just kisses? Yeah, she's my guest star. So I'm Dr. Anthony Redgrave. I am the co-founder and board member of the Trans Doe Task Force. We our primary work is identifying unidentified people who may have been transgender in life. But we have since expanded to cover missing persons cases, unclaimed persons, and anyone within the queer community as well. So anyone who is marginalized due to their orientation or gender identity, as well as sex workers. We also include sex workers and people in the kink community as being under our umbrella. Just anyone who might be regarded as a sexual minority. And so our work is we do work with law enforcement to get these cases solved. We bring them to their attention. We do a lot of educating on like what is unique about cases that involve transgender people and what kind of special care we need. And we go as far as when the need arises to doing forensic genetic genealogy to identify unidentified people as well. So we have an in-house team who's educated on genetic genealogy and also on trans issues as well.
The reputation of the police is that they are not necessarily open to this kind of assistance or education, that there's a wall of resistance, a sort of, go away and let us do our job.
So yeah, how do we is a good question. So what I will say is that the cold case detectives and the medical examiners are very different. When we're working with homicide investigators, cold case detectives, people who work in the medical examiner's office, they have a much different set of goals in general and are generally more concerned with, getting the work done and, getting the help. So when we approach someone in those positions and we present them with a solution rather than a problem, that's usually met very positively if we get a response. Like the worst thing that's happened to us is actually just not getting a response. But the first thing that happens is I didn't realize that's a problem, and it's usually followed by what can we do to fix it. We're aware that there's a huge rift between the queer community and the police, and that puts us in a very interesting position of having to be that intermediary to the point where if we're working with families of missing persons, we will occasionally do a lot of advocating and do the relaying of information ourselves, because we know how to present it. So
walk me through how that works. So let's say that I go missing this week. How do you come into contact with that information, and how do you proceed?
Generally, we follow the news quite a bit. We follow the news. We follow, missing persons databases. We have a missing persons specialist whose job it is to just do the data mining, and get it into our database, which is a completely different thing. That's something I definitely want to cover. Is we have our own database system called LAMP, LGBTQ Accountability for Missing and Murdered Persons. And that is where we house the information that we have, which comes from multiple sources that come from the national databases that are most frequently used by law enforcement, and from the public, and from news reports, from social media. And we house all this information here about what we know about people who have gone missing, and cases of unidentified people and unclaimed people as well, so that we can compare those to each other in the unfortunate event that a missing person is found deceased and unidentified. We're able to match information and pass that off onto law enforcement to confirm. We do this ourselves because the national databases do not have a way. Well, it's even worse now with the executive order on gender ideology.
Right. So I assume we've been scrubbed from a lot of these, or
Yes.
the markers that would identify me as a trans woman.
Yeah, like
Scrubbed.
we actually were able to advocate with the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs, to get unspecified or other added as an option to fields. It's still there, it's just not used in the same way anymore. And any information about a person being trans on the people who are referenced as transgender in the database has now been like changed back to assigned sex and dead name. There's at least one case where a person's legal name was changed and they still have changed it back to their dead name. That's very unfortunate. So what we do is we aggregate all the information that we can find and put it all in one place where we're not restricted to not being able to compare across sex categories or run comparisons that way. So we do a lot of manual work ourselves, whereas the national database has some automated systems, but the automated systems do not allow for the kind of comparisons that we need. So to answer your original question about what would happen if you went missing, if there was a police report or a news report about your missing persons case, or if a family or a friend of yours contacted us, we would immediately get your information into our database and start producing flyers and social media posts about that. Oh, hi, Katie.
This is the Lady Bethesda.
We would immediately start getting information together, making sure it's in the right place, making sure that your missing persons case was reported to the right agency in all the ways that it needs to be reported, because many people don't actually know that there's more than one way to report a person missing, and there's definitely a process that needs to be done to make sure that case is being worked and to be followed up on. So we would make sure that everything that was needing to happen to make sure that your information was in all the right places and being handled by the right people would get done.
So now I am in Southern Connecticut, so I'm assuming that when the information comes to you that I'm missing, Connecticut State Troopers, who else would be on that checklist?
It would be the local police from your hometown. If you were last reported seen from a location that was farther away from home, it would be the local police in that area. And yes, the state police as well. And it just depends on where you were from and where you were. And also, as well as any like LGBTQI liaisons in the area, we would also want to interface with them.
What would you say, I don't know if you have these kind of numbers, but the percentage of cases that you unearth on your own versus family, friends coming to you saying, my daughter's missing?
That's hard for me to say. That would be a question I'd have to ask my missing person specialist. But I will tell you that we got a pretty even mix of that sort of thing. I would say that most of our information comes from data mining, and the information that we get from family and friends, we take very seriously, and we stay in very close contact with those family and friends, because oftentimes police will only take a report from a family of origin instead of chosen family. So when we are contacted by chosen family who's missing a friend or loved one, we know how to handle those differently so that those cases also get taken care of. And occasionally, something that will happen is a person from someone's family of origin will come to us and say that their family member is missing, And we've had instances where that was actually done maliciously. I just want to lay that out, where someone comes from an unsupportive home that they've left willingly. If we catch somebody doing that, we will not add that to our database. And if we are able to find that person alive and well on social media anywhere, we'll let them know that they need to report themselves as safe to their local law enforcement so that they're not being looked for the wrong reasons.
This episode of Transqat is sponsored by Fox and Feather Healing Arts Services. Some experiences and emotions are just too big for words alone. In art therapy, you use art materials and the creative process to invite healing, express emotions, and experience spiritual connection. Fox and Feather in Guilford, Connecticut specializes in the treatment of eating disorders, trauma, anxiety, depression, and grief. They treat female-identifying clients and members of the LGBTQIA+ community, ages 12 and up. What sets this art therapy practice apart is their use of art as a form of magic and emotional alchemy. Call today at 860-575-4500 for your free 15-minute phone consultation. You can learn more and meet the team at foxfeatherhealingarts.com, or you can email at Sarah, SARAH, at foxfeatherhealingarts.com. And there's sort of the traditional image of a runaway and what that scenario plays out as, but it might be as simple as leaving your biological home and going to stay with friends for a while, finding chosen family who are going to take care of you. So I imagine that becomes very complicated.
It really does. When someone's a minor, it becomes so much more complicated for a number of reasons. For the reason of, who has legal custody of this child and who is responsible for them if they get found. What kind of safety issues are there and what can actually be done. And also just if missing queer youth, if queer youth go missing, they're actually at a much heightened risk of being victimized and also subject to trafficking as well.
I'm about 45 minutes south of the Berlin Turnpike, which has traditionally had a real history of trafficking through some of the motels on there. What, since you've talked about different folks who are working for you, what kind of a staff, how big is the organization?
It's pretty small. I can count our number of volunteers on one hand right at the moment. Maybe I might have to go onto the other hand a little bit, but there's three of us on the board. We have a couple of people who help out with the database. We have a handful of people on deck who help with the forensic genetic genealogy if we get a case we need to work. We keep it pretty small. We're a small organization because we really only want to work with people who are part of the community or who are like very strong allies who have a close family member who's also trans. Because it's very important for us to, lead our own work, because not only have our cases been deprioritized by law enforcement, but also professionals in our field have been deprioritized. We don't often get the same respect as others with the same credentials we have. So, as with any marginalized community, we have to work twice as hard for a fraction of the same respect. So we try to put trans people forward as much as possible. So, but also people in our community don't often have the kind of bandwidth to do this kind of work. It's very traumatic. It's very stressful. Proxy trauma is real. So we have a very small core group, and it's primarily us three board members and just a couple extra people on deck.
What would you say is the difference between what you are and the sort of traditional idea of a private investigator? This is coming from someone who gets all of her law enforcement knowledge from watching Homicide in the Wild.
Okay, so the main difference between us and private investigators is that there's a lot of credentialing that goes on with private investigation, and so we are doing a lot of things just grassroots, ad hoc style, where especially in New England, in order to get a private investigation license, you actually have to have a couple of years of experience in law enforcement. There's different states have different requirements. Some are much easier to get into than others, but here we wouldn't be able to have a license for that. So we're working entirely with public databases and publicly accessible information. Some of it's behind paywalls, which we're able to cover subscriptions with donations that we receive, which is very helpful. We graciously accept donations from the public because that's how we get this work done. We rely on donations and grants exclusively. That's the big difference, is that we don't have access to things like a skip trace system, which is, a pay per search system where you can get things like people's social security numbers and proof of life activity that way. But we can still do a lot because, we're all genealogists as well. Our job is to find people and to research them. So, we know what to look for. We know what systems to use. So that is a very, very different animal in itself, but it also gives us a lot more freedom to do other things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. We have a lot more contact with the public. We're able to articulate a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily be able to if we were in a different position.
So when you're investigating one of these cold cases or one of these missing persons, is the bulk of your work with the databases, or are you out interviewing people and following a trail of...
So most of what we do is online searching. We try to do our work quietly as much as possible. When it comes to the Doe cases, when it comes to the unidentified cases, we work as quietly in the background as possible because the frequency at which cases that we're working on are involved in homicide investigations is very high, and we don't want to compromise any investigations. So we do as little talking as possible. When it comes to doing interviews, we tend to defer to law enforcement about that for policy's sake, but we might help them to know who to go to. And that's something that we frequently do, especially with working the unidentified cases. Once we have a lead on who somebody might have been, we're able to provide them with next of kin and sometimes chosen family as well. Places where they can ask, where they can get DNA samples to compare and confirm. But we don't tend to do a lot of talking unless it's with the family of missing persons, and that's different.
Mm-hmm. Where I imagine that your informed lived experience helps you deal with that level of grief and loss.
Yeah, the way that we look at it is, sometimes when people approach us and talk to us about what we do, they'll obviously get sad. They'll be like, "Oh, this is horrible. How do you deal with this?" The fact of the matter is, while this is a horrible reality, we're able to provide hope where there wasn't any before. So we can't change the fact that this has happened, but we can do is change how it's handled and give answers. So that in itself is hopeful. I'm actually wearing my hoodie right now. This is one of our mottos is "Hope dies last."
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
That's one of our little designs. It's in our store online with
Oh.
all that goes to our organization as well. Most of the graphic design is mine, but we have a couple guest artists. And if there's anybody listening who does who's a trans person who makes art, you can always talk to us and we can put something up if you want to share with us.
Tell folks how they can get in touch with you, how they can support the task force.
Sharing our social media posts is a big one. If you look on Facebook, if you search for Trans Doe Task Force, and if you search for LAMP, LAMMP, LAMP is where you're going to see a lot of the missing persons flyers get posted. Sharing that information is incredibly helpful. Running fundraisers. If you want to talk to us about how you can run fundraisers for us, we'd love to talk to you about that. We are on Tiltify. So if anybody does any streaming on Twitch, you can actually do a Twitch charity stream for us really easily. Mm-hmm. I'm very happy to say that I managed to get that set up. Donating to us directly is a huge deal. There's information about that on our website. It's at transdoetaskforce.org. On Instagram, we're also just at Trans Doe Task Force. We're not on Twitter or X. I'm thinking about getting us on Blue Sky eventually, but I haven't gotten it set up. That's where we are on social media.
I went to Blue Sky when I left Twitter just because of the toxicity, and Blue Sky is fine, but there aren't a lot of people there yet.
Yeah, it's still pretty quiet. So I'm not in a rush to get us on there, but I know that it's definitely a better platform. But the big ones are spreading spreading the word about us, donating, running fundraisers, and taking DNA tests and putting them on GEDmatch. GEDmatch is a third-party website where you can take your DNA results from any of the major companies and upload it there. And that's where we're allowed to use that information for the Doe cases. And the more, hello again. And the more that, the more people that are in there, the more likely you are to get cases solved. You never know who's going to be the key to getting a case solved. We can't even always estimate. We can make some guesses and ask people to upload, but initially, like, the more data is in there, the more likely we are to get cases solved.
I saw on your website this hashtag if I go missing.
Yeah, If I Go Missing is a project that's part of LAMP, where if a person feels like they're in danger of going missing for any reason, if they're in an unstable home situation or if they're unhoused or any situation where they feel like they're possibly at risk of something happening to them, they can pre-list themselves with us and we'll keep that information on hand in the event that it needs to be used. And that doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't get shared with law enforcement or anything until and unless we have reason to believe that you might actually be in danger. Like if a family member contacts us and says that they don't know where you went and you've listed yourself, we'll do that. And you can also remove yourself from it at any time. And we provided that actually as a service because we noticed there were kids on TikTok using the hashtag if I go missing when they were scared about themselves, and we wanted to provide a safer place to do that rather than just putting all your information public. So that's a project that we have up that we hope we don't have to use, but we're glad that we're able to provide it.
I've got to imagine that for trans youth in that situation, particularly not in our states, right? Connecticut and Massachusetts at least have some bulwarks against all of this anti-trans legislation for now. But if you're a trans youth living in Oklahoma and Texas and Florida,
Yeah.
I can see where it could get pretty dark for you, you know, if your parents are not supportive, and that opportunity to say, okay, I have no idea what's going to happen, but here's something I can reach out to that is going to make a tangible difference should the worst happen.
It is, it is a way we can provide some peace of mind. If you look at our public map where we keep the Doe cases, we don't put the missing persons map public. But if you look at like where we're tracking cases, you can see the line where, there's so much more in the southern states, and there's places where there's just no data, just because people aren't being reported at all. And it's pretty telling, like where are places that you should not be, if at all possible. And we also do work internationally. So we also have data for South America. There's a major problem in Brazil. We have information from all over the world, but primarily the United States because that's where we're based. And you can really you can visualize the problem areas if you look.
So the database, LAMP, is something proprietary. You guys have you created it, you have access to it, but nobody else does.
Yeah. So what we do is actually investigators who are with law enforcement can request access to it, and we keep pretty good tabs on who we allow to use it to make sure they're using it for the right purposes. We want them to access our information. We want our information to be accessible to people who have valid reason to use it. For example, like the Doe map is public because the Doe information is all public. But the missing persons information, because there's so many underage kids in there, there's so many people who are really at risk, we're not gonna provide that publicly at all. And so that's pretty much only for us and for investigators. As far as like how the system works, we're actually working on improving it right now. I have some feelers out to make improved version of the system that will create automatic comparisons instead of us having to do it manually. Because right now it's mainly a spreadsheet, and you can do only so many like automations with spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are magical, and I love them, but I need something that'll work a little better than that.
Right. Is this something that AI could be helpful with going forward?
We have worried about the use of AI just because basically once you access it, your information is in it, and I feel like that's not that's not a secure system that we want to really dabble in. I don't believe that it's something that we want to use yet, possibly not ever, just because the way that it works is by aggregating information to learn more. And so we don't know what would happen with our data once it was used for that. So we're not going to be doing that.
It's November 12th as I record this. The U.S. House of Representatives is set to vote today on a bill to end the 43-day-long government shutdown. And you might well ask, did collaboration and compromise at long last win out over extremism? Is this proof that the system isn't as broken and hopeless as we'd feared? Nope, the Democrats caved. They just caved. Today's headline in The Onion says it best. Chuck Schumer helps pull Democrats back from brink of courage. The Don't Cave sticker is available in the Transqat store. It's just $4. Go to transqat.com and click that link to the store. Buy a bunch of them and slap them around your town to express your disappointment and disgust. Transqat, we stand, even when they don't.
It is very easy for aggregated information that was aggregated for the purpose of something beneficial to be weaponized.
Absolutely. Funny you should mention that, because like as an academic, as a queer academic, I have the opportunity to write academic research papers, and there are several topics that I've chosen to not write on because I know that if I were to, the research that I've done could potentially be used against us. It's a very frustrating position to be in because I want to be able to provide resources and create things that could be citable by other trans academics, but I have to make certain choices morally on my own, that I have to choose to not write about certain things that I think there should be research on, but if there was, it could be used negatively. Something that I've been actually working on is finding international academic journals to publish in instead of the US. So like the next couple of things I'm working on are probably going to be published in the UK or Australia.
Tell me a little about yourself and the journey to how you came to want to do this. What made you want to set this up?
Yeah, so I have a storied history. So I can talk about it in terms of my educational background, but if I just start at the beginning, I'm intersex, first off. I did not know that until I was probably around 30. I think I was around 30 because nobody told me. I just knew something was weird.
How did you come to find that out?
Well, through DNA, actually.
Oh, wow.
Long story short, I took my first genealogical DNA test and got an email back from someone asking me if I'd marked my gender marker properly. And just so that they would know for putting me into the database. And I said, yes, I did mark it properly. And then started talking to my doctors and pursuing karyotyping to find out why they would say that. So after I raised that question and I started pursuing that, the test that I did came back inconclusive, but Mass Health wouldn't pay for a more in-depth test because they were like, what are you going to do about it? You don't need to actually have this information, which is great. But so then I talked to my sister, and my sister, who is 10 years older than me, was privy to some of the conversations that went on between my parents that I did not know about when I was an infant. So she was able to fill in some gaps for me, and that was the evidence that I needed. And this was after I'd transitioned. So I'd already had the trans experience of, having to go through, when I started, it was, we had to go to the clinical sexologist and do the Harry Benjamin standards of care and everything. And I did that. I did all of that. And as it turned out, when I got older and I found out that I'm actually intersex as well as being trans, I think those things are not mutually exclusive, by the way. I had a transgender experience. I'm a trans man. I just happen to also be intersex because I was socially raised as female, and therefore, and for better or worse, was assigned female at birth. I had to have that experience, and I don't regret any of it, and it doesn't, sully anything that's happened to me at all. But, as I started to uncover more about how that could have come to be, I realized that as a small child, I had been in places where there was certain research being done by a certain John Money.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
and I don't know if he or any of his colleagues were actually involved in anything that had to do with me, but it's very possible, just based on proximity. I was in Baltimore. So, yeah. And so I have those things to think about. I'm relatively healthy. I have some genetic predispositions to things, and I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which, as you may know, for some reason a lot of trans people also have that.
Hmm.
Um and but like, I am what I am, and so that was a major formative part of my life there. But I remember when I was like 5 years old, I remember standing in front of the mirror after taking a bath being like, they're all wrong. I'm going to grow up to be a boy. What's wrong with them?
Hmm.
And I knew that. I didn't know why I knew that, but I knew that. And it was like completely beyond me why anyone would think anything different. And I proved myself right. I proved everybody else wrong. So,
Were your folks still alive at 30 when you discovered this? Were you able to have a conversation with them?
well, my mom, I haven't really talked to my mom about the whole intersex thing, but when I came out as trans, she's been supportive. Like, she helped me pay for my name change. Later on, I found out it was probably because she felt bad about what she was advised by the doctors to do to take care of me. But, we're okay now. My dad, I didn't grow up with my dad. I actually found my dad's family later on through genealogy. Actually, I was just getting to that part of the story. Um, and so he'd already passed away by the time I found his family, and they've been really good to me as well. At least most of them have. I have a really cool aunt who was like really close to my dad, and she's like, the best auntie you could possibly have, and I love her. So, Aunt Nita, hi. Fast forward a little bit from where I started in my story, like the next piece of the puzzle is like how I got into the genealogy part of it was not knowing who my dad was. I spent a good 20 years trying to research on the internet, trying to find him. And eventually I did find his family. I called them the day after Thanksgiving. They passed me around on the phone and everybody was so glad to hear from me. It was
Wow.
really cool because they had this picture floating around of my dad holding a baby that they didn't know who the baby was. And I had the same picture of my dad holding me. It was like best case scenario. Absolutely. It took a long time to get there. And what's funny is now I could do the same thing that I did then in like a half an hour.
I was going to say that the resources available for that sort of thing. I remember early on in the growth of the internet when genealogy was suddenly a huge thing because you could connect with people, but
Mhm.
it was amateur compared to what's.
Absolutely. There's so much more out there that we can work with. And so that's what really turned me on to the idea of like doing searches for people. And my spouse, Lee, also was adopted and had to go through a similar experience. And so together we ended up taking adoptee clients and like doing professional genealogy to help people find their birth families. And after a while, the puzzles started getting easier. We started getting like much better at what we were doing. And then the opportunity fell into our laps to actually work on law enforcement cases through another nonprofit, the DNA Doe Project, which is actually where we started founding the Trans Doe Task Force, like as a grassroots project while we were still working there. And that's really how we like got in on the ground floor. We were some of the first like 12 or so volunteers working cases with them, and eventually outgrew that and had to focus on our own work. During that time, I started going back to school. I got my bachelor's degree is actually in creative writing. I had a very different plan for myself before I started doing any of this. I'm still working on a novel. One day I might finish it. You never know. But then I made a hard pivot when I started working on this. So that was my bachelor's degree. My master's is in instructional design because I realized that there was a real need for education in doing forensic genetic genealogy specifically. So I started developing a training course to teach other professionals how to do it, and now I've run it for law enforcement so they can learn how to solve their own cases. And then after that, I came to the realization that as a queer person, as I mentioned earlier, you have to work twice as hard for a fraction of the same respect. So then I went for the doctorate. So my doctorate is in transformative leadership and education. Technically, the thing I'm qualified to do through that is be like a high school principal or head of school, which I could do if I wanted to, but I don't. I prefer teaching cops, honestly. It's not that different from teaching middle schoolers, I'll say that. And I mean that in the sweetest way possible. Like, you get your own ideas in your head, and then you have to undo those, is what I mean.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, if like a sixth grader or a seventh grader, they are still amenable to learning. You know, by the time a kid hits high school, they're kind of set in their ways. They've
A
decided
little
what
bit.
they're going to put the effort out for and what they're not.
Yeah, but then you get to once you figure out what turns them on to really learning, then you get the neuroplasticity, and once people really get hooked. So I teach through game-based learning, actually. Like the whole training course I run is run like a game. We call it a simulation so the cops don't get scared.
We're not
It's a
having
fun
fun,
time.
guys. Don't worry. No fun.
No fun at all. No, it is actually a lot of fun, and I do get a lot of really good feedback about it. So like the final project is actually solving a fictional Doe case that I've set up as like a game. And like that's what I do on the non-trans Doe end of things. And so that was what I did for my master's degree. And for my doctorate, I really leaned hard into the Trans Doe Task Force. And so my doctoral dissertation is actually on the topic of need-based standards of practices for getting cases involving marginalized victims solved. I interviewed law enforcement, medical examiners, I interviewed professional genealogists, family members of missing, murdered, and unidentified and wrongfully incarcerated people, and consumers of DNA tests, and found out what everybody knew, what everybody thought they knew but was wrong about, what everybody was afraid of, and what everybody needed. And so I was able to use that to develop a lot of what we're doing now of how to educate people, how to get people past the hump of realizing that they don't know something. That's always the hardest part of teaching, is making people realize that they don't know what they don't know, and
Right.
dealing with the embarrassment or pushback that might occur from that is, even if it's really subtle, even if it's internalized, that can be a really hard thing to deal with, is like suddenly becoming aware that there's this dearth of information that you were filling in your own gaps with. And that happens with people in privileged positions. People who have white cisgender heterosexual male privilege don't realize what we're going through. And there's a fair number of people who aren't doing that maliciously. They just don't know. So I try to come at everything from a point of view of education and trying to help people understand that. Because once people understand that, once they realize that there's things they don't know, usually a natural compassion comes out. And we need more of that, and less pushback and less fear on both ends. Like, we're over here being afraid of white cisgender heterosexual male people, and they're being afraid of us. And those are things that can be solved with education and with kindness wherever possible.
Right.
Obviously, it's not possible everywhere, but there's enough people out there that are receptive that can learn.
I kind of have a sense of what investigators, both active and cold case investigators, might need to know about folks like us. But what does a medical examiner need to know?
The medical examiner end of things is really interesting, because when it comes to Doe cases, if, let's say, somebody who had gender affirming surgery ends up as an unidentified deceased person and ends up in the medical examiner's office, they might not know what they're looking at. After a certain degree of decomposition, it's actually pretty indiscernible. And once a person is skeletal remains, then you're more likely to see their assigned sex at birth. And so that's something that we really enjoy educating about, is trans bodies, and how to differentiate, how to separate the reality of a trans body from a trans identity, and how that can be reflected in medical examiner reports. So a while ago, I actually co-authored a paper with a medical examiner of, again, best practices for writing medical reports on deceased people, like how to use gender neutral language, how to add footnotes into your writing that define things that aren't common knowledge, like specific terms about gender affirming surgeries and things like that, and how to politely avoid gendered language when you can't assume a person's gender identity, but you can assign a sex to them based on their remains.
I imagine that well, I mean, that it would intersect with the reality that not all trans folks want or can afford gender affirming surgeries, right? So you can have someone who is living full time in their chosen gender but has not had any surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
So when an examiner is looking at the body of this deceased person, I can imagine that there might be questions if they don't have the
Absolutely. Yeah, and another aspect of that that I think is interesting and very helpful, something that we can do, is we have as queer people, we have an understanding of what to look for. Like there's tattoos and piercings and clothing that have all been queer coded in different ways throughout time. So even like re-examining older cases, let's say, I mean, there's things like the star tattoo on the wrist, things like that. Things like, for it's less of a thing now, but what ear someone has pierced, that wasn't necessarily even a thing at the time, but it became a thing due to pop culture, so people started using it.
Yeah. Back in the 80s, that was very important. Which ear did you get pierced?
Absolutely. Thanks, George Michael.
Yeah.
So when we see reports of unidentified remains and we start seeing things like what clothes they were wearing, what tattoos they had, we can sometimes use that to guide the investigators in the right direction. Like, this thing that you're seeing here might indicate that this person is a member of our community, and that might give you an idea of where to look, who to be interviewing, like more information about what their identity might have been instead of just your basic like height, age, sex estimations. And other things that will lead us down, if someone has indications that they may be a member of the queer community but also is the victim of overkill, if they've been victims of sexual assaults, injuries around the face, burning, things like that are unfortunately very common, as I'm sure you know, that give us more clues to think this might have been hate-based violence. There's a number of things that we can teach specifically medical examiners about trans bodies and trans identities that will help them in making reports and guiding an investigation down a path that might lead to an ID before we ever have to step in with genealogy, because that's expensive and time consuming, and getting cases solved is what matters the most.
I wouldn't have thought of tattoos, but now that you say it, I have among other things, the transgender symbol on my back. A good friend of mine has the molecular model of T on his arm. So yeah, there are clues there that you might, particularly if you have a number of tattoos, you might not be paying attention to any one in particular.
Absolutely. Tattoos are usually a big clue for us. In my case, I have a really good rapport with all of my tattoo artists, so I'm very likely to go unidentified for very long because they'd probably recognize their work.
I'm imagining that there aren't a lot of specifics about some of the cases you've handled, not so much the missing persons, but now, solving cases. Is there anything you can talk about that way?
Yeah, there's a few that we can talk about. So we have a couple of active cases right now that we're working. One of them that is on our plate right now is a Trans Doe case out of Houston, Texas, actually. Likely trans woman was found deceased in, oh gosh, I'm gonna need to make sure I get you the right information here, so hang on.
Yeah.
I've got so many dates flying around in my brain. I need to make sure I'm giving you the right thing. So we've had a number of cases that we have actually gotten solved and that you can read about on our website. Specifically, this Harris County case, the genealogy has just started on this one. They were found in 2019 in Brays Bayou, face down in the water. I actually, that's the other thing I didn't mention. I actually make the forensic art for these cases as well. I taught myself how to do forensic imaging.
Oh, wow.
So if you go on our website and you look at, there's still our most recent post, Harris County, Texas Doe. I did the forensic image for this one based off of a skull x-ray. We're pretty sure this is going to be a trans woman based on a number of factors, mainly based on clothing and the fact that when the body was originally found, they assumed that a female body, and then after that they did DNA testing and found XY chromosomes. It's very similar to like a case that was really our first case that we really researched and like spearheaded, was the case of Julie Doe out of Florida, who is now identified as Pamela Walton. Was definitely like obvious from the get-go that this was going to be a trans woman. Found wearing female clothing, feminine coding clothing, had breast implants, had a nose job, bleach blonde hair. She was definitely a trans woman. When her remains were first found, they thought she was a cisgender woman based on the fact that she was found in the 80s, and they just weren't used to seeing trans women, and nobody did any DNA tests on that. And the breast implants and everything. There was also some pitting and grooves in her pelvis that at the time people believed was the result of hormone washes that happened during pregnancy. So they assumed that she had children. But it's been proven since then that even cisgender men can have this. She was found in, I'm going to make sure I get my dates right again, because we have more than one case that we talk about at the same time. So Julie Doe, Pamela Walton, was found in 1988. Her breast implants dated from before people were putting serial numbers on them, so she couldn't even be tracked by the hospital. That was one that when we were at the DNA Doe project, we started the genealogy on that, but we had to leave her behind when we formed the Trans Doe Task Force, so she was solved by another team that was working on her. And she was an unusual case because of knowing ahead of time that she was going to be a trans woman and having her be initially classified as a cisgender woman. It's usually the other way around. But given the circumstances, she was thought to be cisgender and then found to be trans after re-examination of her remains in, I can't remember if it's 2014 or 2016. Then when DNA karyotyping was done and she was found to have XY chromosomes, that's when they nicknamed her Julie Doe after To Wong Fu. Thanks for everything, Julie Newmar.
So you're working in some cases on cases that are in this like 30 years old?
Often, yeah.
Wow.
We tend to get tapped in for older cases, after everything else has been tried. Then it comes to us. The 2019 case that we have right now is the most recent one we've worked in a while. So those are two examples of cases we've been involved in. Other ones that we've done recently. So there was the Owensboro, Kentucky case that we also solved. We thought he was going to possibly be a gay man based on the way the remains presented, based on the cause of death and everything. We have no evidence to suggest that he was yet, but not that many people have come forth. So Owensboro, Kentucky was identified as William Dennis Matthews. He was found in 1990. He was burned and sexually assaulted. And so the Kentucky medical examiner that we worked, she was a dream to work with. She was amazing, and we'd love to work another case with her. And then the other one, the other like big name one that again didn't actually turn out to be a member of the queer community, just in the wrong place at the wrong time, was Jasper County John Doe. So he ended up being William Joseph Lewis. And he was a victim of Larry Eiler, who was a serial killer who specifically targeted gay men in the area. His family was very grateful. His family has been absolutely lovely. So those are two examples. Those ones didn't end up being trans people or queer people. But the other one that we worked while we were at the DNA Doe project that is very near and dear to my heart, and unfortunately we're not allowed to say what their name was the San Mateo Pillar Point Doe, who was found in San Francisco and was a victim of overkill. They were like multiple forms of injury, face beaten and barely recognizable, and they were found in 1983 within hours of death. So that was one that we saw through to the end with the genealogy, and it took months to get their name, and I would just cry myself to sleep at night, just not knowing, until wake myself up crying, feeling like they were telling me their name in my sleep. It was a lot. Also, because of our line of work, we often do get to see the post-mortem images that aren't public, and so I have that living with me forever. I had to see that. That's why I say proxy trauma is real. Like, people who work in law enforcement can be really hard about it and like act like they're not affected, but we all are. We all are like mirror neurons.
Right.
We get that.
You've talked about the proxy trauma and the toll that this work can take, but what does it feel like when you resolve this for somebody? Does
Oh, wow. The feeling is like it's like solving the like it's like finishing the most interesting puzzle that you've ever worked on in your entire life, except it matters so much more. It's like the sense of just completion, but also knowing that you're going to give people answers. It's not going to be the answers they want, not usually, but being able to like really let someone know what happened to their loved one so that they can, feel some kind of peace. I have a hard time calling it closure. Closure happens in a different way, but with the case of Jasper County John Doe Bill, when his family was informed, they obviously went through a lot, but they were still very grateful to us for being able to do that. It's not the case all the time. Like, unfortunately, especially with the trans cases, the likelihood that the family of origin isn't actually going to care is pretty high. But there's always someone out there who misses someone, and being able to actually lay them to rest is a big deal. But what it feels like for us, it's complicated. It's like it's a sense of relief for one. It's a sense of accomplishment. Always involves crying. There's always so much crying of lots of different kinds of tears. Because we get to know these people before we even know what their names are. We're learning about their families and where they came from. And then all of a sudden we have that breakthrough and it all comes together. It's pretty overwhelming a lot of the time.
it becomes real as opposed to something in a spreadsheet?
Yes, exactly.
Anthony, thank you so much, not just for being here, but for the work you're doing. I wondered if, since we're going to have this together and available for people for Trans Day of Remembrance, if
Mm.
maybe the last word could go to you about what TDOR is and what it means.
Yeah. So Trans Day of Remembrance for us, we like we focus on the unidentified, and there's always a list of names inside of the TDOR list that are listed as name unknown. And for whatever reason, they were not reported in the news with a name, either that either that they're unidentified or that people just didn't care. They were like, "Oh, it's a trans person. They died," and that's an unfortunate reality that sometimes the name just doesn't matter to other people. So we hold space there for them. Likewise, we, every time that we are able to give someone a name, we also add them to our personal TDOR list. Because every year we'll do our own little vigil of just reading the unidentifieds. And if we've identified someone or located a missing person, we'll include them even if they didn't die that year, because they haven't been recognized before. And that matters a lot to make sure we hold space for them as well. It's a very somber time. It's emotionally heavy. The first time I was at a reading of the list, I didn't make it in even 3 names. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to cry about it right now. The first year I went to a TDOR event, I tried to help read the list. And the first one on the list was baby with ambiguous genitalia in a trash can. That was my first experience.
Oh, Anthony.
Yeah, so that hit different for me. And I had to step out. So like since then, like I know better than to read the list myself. I have to have the other volunteers do it. But it's important that we hold that space.
Next on Transqat, we have a conversation with Maribel Delgado, the executive director of Transcending Beyond, a nonprofit that educates and supports parents, caregivers, and families of trans and LGBTQIA+ folks. Don't forget to take advantage of our special screening of the short film This Is Jan. It's available to Transqat viewers and listeners until December 6th. Details are included in episode 102, and the link is available at transqat.com. I'll be hosting a screening/discussion group for the film at the next Community Day at Prism Counseling in Killingworth. It's November 29th, and if you're interested, reply "interested" to their event on Facebook. Also, I'll be hosting a Jeopardy-style trivia night at Windsor Public Library on Tuesday, December 2nd. It's not exclusively queer categories, but it skews heavily that way, largely because they weren't interested in Latin grammar trivia. What is the ablative absolute, Alex? This has been Transqat. I'm Clare McCarthy. Thank you for listening. Let's talk soon.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
Writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies.
Your monies.
Your monies.
not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
or ask Claire a question.
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.